So if not, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm Greg Huth, the County Law Director, and by our ordinances, I'm chair of this board, so I wanted to call the meeting to order at 9:30 on June 13th. Welcome, everybody. Stacy, could you go ahead and call the roll?
Here.
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 Here. Here.
Thank you. Is anyone signed in to speak? Great, thank you. Can you call anyone sign up to speak to forward to and make their presentation?
Please be mindful that you have 4 minutes to speak. Also, when you are ready to begin, please hit the push button on the microphone. First person.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? Everybody hear me?
Yes.
So Mike Weiss and I represent Lime. We submitted some written testimony, and I'm up here really to answer questions. You can see from our testimony, and just a backdrop, we've been engaged with the county on the proposed rules. We're excited about this opportunity. It's going to be a great program, and Lime's very committed to being both in the city and in some of the inner ring suburbs as well. One of the changes that you made from an earlier draft of the rules to a current draft is eliminating the maximum number of scooters. And that was absolutely critical for them. They want to have the right number of scooters in the city, and they want to have the right number of scooters in the suburbs, and most likely that number, based on their experience in Columbus and some other cities, is going to be higher than that initial maximum number. So again, I'm happy to answer questions, but in your testimony, you'll see a focus on a concern about certain information sharing and how that comes up against some of their internal policies and potentially even some privacy issues. And then the second issue was the use of employees for the full scope of services that have been laid out in the rules, and specifically they have a special program, as some other operators do, for charging, where they're happy if people take a scooter home, charge it, and return it, but these aren't employees. This is just a kind of a ride-sharing component that they have where they're encouraging people overnight to charge the scooter, so that they would be looking for an exclusion from your rules for that charging component. So if you have any questions, happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. Oh, you have a question?
Okay,
sorry.
Yeah, I thought maybe I could bring it up to Mike, but it's probably better to bring it up now. Mike Foley, not Mike Weiss. Mike Weiss, we did find in a earlier draft, we were getting comments from companies saying, we don't collect this data that you're requiring us to share, and a change was made to the regulations that data would only be shared if collected by the company. Mm-hmm. Are there additional concerns from Lime that we do collect this data, however, for various reasons, we don't wish to share it with the county?
Mr. Huth, so is what you're saying that you would want, if we collect it, you want it? Is that basically what you're saying?
We came up with a list of data that the county thought would be useful for it to have, and require the companies to provide this information. Here's the list, but you only have to provide it if you collect it for your own business purposes. So we weren't going to ask the companies to collect additional data on the county's behalf. So if there is data that you collect, but for whatever reason, whether it be trade secret concerns or privacy concerns, that you don't want to share it with the county, because at that point it's likely to become a public record. I think we would be open to making changes, but I just want to know from the company's perspective.
Yes. So any individual information we would have have concerns about. And so obviously with that is the whole subset under the individual information, gender and age. I mean, we wouldn't want to provide any. I mean, I think people ride a scooter, they have an expectation that there's going to be no individual information shared. I think what would be, and whether we have a phone call or talk about it, just talk about what you're trying to get from an aggregate standpoint and let us provide aggregate information to you, which I think the company would be very open to doing.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. That it? Okay, thanks.
Good, thank you.
Stacy, so the next one.
Sam Cooper.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sam Cooper. I'm a senior manager for government partnerships at Bird. Want to thank the county, the Office of Sustainability, Administrative Rules Board for working to bring scooters back to Cleveland and in the county. We're really excited. We hope to work with the county and the city to bring affordable, clean transportation to Cleveland and other areas of the county. Just high level, wanted to make a couple points. First and foremost, we really think we align with the Office of Sustainability's goals. The data we're seeing from other cities, such as Denver and Portland, is that about a third of all users have said that they've used a scooter instead of being in an Uber or a Lyft or a car trip. And so we are seeing substantial mode shift. And we know that, the Office of Sustainability is certainly on board with these goals. In addition, from a rules perspective, we know the county's done a lot of work. We applaud the county for doing a lot of work with the city and the surrounding cities to streamline regulations. We would just like to reinforce that that's a priority. Where there are conflicting regulations, that those get ironed out. So we can just abide by, one set of rules when operating in the public right of way. We want to be good stewards in the public right of way, and I think that's the best way to get that task. So again, thank you to the county, and we look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you. All right. Stacy, can you read the item on our agenda to the record, please?
The Cuyahoga County Department of Sustainability has submitted to the board a proposed rule for receiving a bicycle and scooter share vendor's license. The department requests that the board adopt this as a permanent rule. Mike Foley, Director of Sustainability for the county, will now give a brief presentation on the proposed rules.
Thanks, Stacy. Thanks, board members. Appreciate your willing to serve on the board. Thanks, Jonathan, for helping to organize this. I've got a quick PowerPoint we wanted to walk through, just kind of walking through the overview of the rules and also the just some of the reasons why we want to do this, what bike share is and scooter share is. So second slide, I guess. So what is scooter share and bike share? It's this kind of thing that's become a thing, I guess, over the last 5 or 10 years. Started off as kind of bike share, and it's kind of this innovative transportation program where has a system or network. Subscribers have access to bikes or scooters, and through self-service locations or through their phones, basically, they can pick up a bike and ride it from one place to another, or a scooter from one place to another. They're great for short-distance trips. I think as Sam talked about, they can be picked up and dropped, conveniently to places where people want to go, and they're pretty easy to operate and pretty easy to run. Just a little history. So the county actually began the foray into Cleveland or Cuyahoga County a couple years ago with UH Bikes. We get some money from NOACA through a TLCI grant to help subsidize a bike share operation. We hired a group called Cycle Hop, which is a national operator of bike share systems. They brought in the bikes that you see out. We've got some out front, the UH Bike system. UH became kind of a sponsor of the network. The network only has probably about 30 to 35 locations. Most of them are physically docked locations. They've got a couple that are dockless where they just kind of geofence or geocode a little area. And the bikes they're getting old. They don't even make those bikes anymore, by the way. So they're 3 years old. They don't make the stations anymore for the bikes. So one of the things we're looking at is how do we kind of recreate a network or enhance a network that is larger than what we have right now and expands out to the suburbs. We're Cuyahoga County. We want to see this happen as in many places as possible. So, next slide. So as talked about, so there's this kind of revolution in bike share in a couple years ago. So where you had to have bikes going from dock to dock to dock to dock, and you take them out of a dock and put them back into a dock in a location. Bike share companies created dockless systems, so each bike has a GPS on it, and and some have little codes you can just point in, so you don't actually need a dock to park a bike anymore. So the dock systems have kind of gone away, and dockless has become the standard, I think, and kind of going forward. But then scooters have come along, and so Lime and Bird especially have been kind of the leaders in kind of scooter companies now, and a lot of cities have just kind of scooters all over the place. And so they have been kind of the predominant kind of in this industry. I think kind of this is where kind of the industry's heading is having dockless bikes and scooters as kind of the way to travel around. Initially, there was just kind of a lack of regulation, so cities all of a sudden would have a whole bunch of scooters, or mostly scooters, kind of dropped in on them, and weren't ready for this, and so there's kind of some chaos, and there's memes on the internet of kind of bikes being dockless bikes in trees and in rivers and other places, and so cities have tried to get ahead of the curve, or not get ahead of the curve, trying to react to that, I think, as much as possible, and have started to put together regulations on how operators have to behave or operate in communities. So that is what we are here for today. This is actually Jonathan did a lot of work on this. It's kind of, and I think this is from a national industry kind of standard, basically. But Jonathan's kind of put together this list of different cities and different kind of categories of things that cities regulate. And it goes to everything from safety to data to fleet sizes to operations and maintenance. And so there's a whole list of categories that we've tried to take kind of the best practices from and put them into our rules, our draft rules. Okay. So in terms of our draft rules, I just want to walk through this real quick. So we're creating a countywide licensing system for operators. Basically there would be a $5,000 license to operate in the county, and a 15-cent per ride fee that would go back to the city where the ride originates from. So one of the things we want to do is expand this, so it's just not in Cleveland, but some of the suburbs, first-ring suburbs, especially starting off, and that they would get, as a ride originates in that city, they would get a 15-cent fee, and we would have a memorandum of MOU with them, and to organize that. The proposed minimum amount of bikes or scooters is 150. We don't have a max, as Mike Weiss said, and we'll have some minimum rebalancing requirements. So one of the things we want to do is just kind of we want to make sure that folks know that there's some places where there's going to be scooters at or bikes, and they can count on at least a place where every night the operators will go and rebalance back a minimum amount into these locations. We would sign, the county would sign an MOU agreement with interested cities. Jonathan's already drafted one up that we've kind of promulgated to the cities to see what they think. We would agree to share the per trip fees, as we've talked about. Munis, other than the city of Cleveland, in exchange for this kind of the county doing the licensing, cities outside of the city of Cleveland would refrain from creating their own right-of-way permits. So one of the things we want to do, as we talked about, is expanding, bike share out into the suburbs, is we want to minimize the kind of the hoops that we think operators will have to go through. So we want to do this countywide. Cleveland, as we've been kind of negotiating and talking to Cleveland over the last year or so about this, one of the things they just feel strongly that they've got, they're going to have the majority of the devices in their city, and they want just a little bit more kind of control over it. So they put together their own ordinance and are promulgating their own rules that will marry up with ours. We talked, we've kind of insisted on this. We need to make sure our rules dovetail together. So the city of Cleveland will be the only city that can force operators to get a right-of-way permit under this kind of scheme or schematics. Bikes can ride anywhere in the county, but local governments can enforce their own rules. So one of the things, so if the city of Lakewood says you can't ride your bike on or a scooter on the sidewalk, or you got to wear a helmet, then they can enforce those rules, right? We're not going to try to tell them what they can enforce or not enforce in terms of their own traffic laws or rules. A couple of things that would just future considerations that we want to kind of get these rules and regulations out of the way, but we've got some money set aside with NOACA again for a second round of the bike share expansion, and so we will probably be doing an RFP for an operator just of bike share in the coming year. So above and beyond, so this is mostly going to deal with scooters, bike share companies, but bike share operators have a little bit extra, I think, problems, right now. Scooters are kind of taking over the market. NOACA has given us money to create a bike share network, and and we want to do that, so we've got some resources to expand just the bike share part of this. The city of Cleveland, just so you know, has it's about total. We've got about $600,000 for this effort, and the city of Cleveland has put in a $250,000 match. And then the other thing is sponsorship of the network. So right now, UH is the sponsor of UH Bikes is what they're called. Cycle Hop operates the system. UH's sponsorship ends in December, and they've notified everyone that they are not going to be renewing their sponsorship. So I think what it does is it gives the county the ability to create a sponsorship for bike share and scooter share network as it gets developed. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as we put together the draft requirements, regulations, I think you've all got a copy of them. We've got, the kind of Exhibit A is the requirements basically for the operators, and it kind of goes through safety, maintenance, parking, data sharing requirements. Next slide. So just a couple things we just want to highlight. So there's, and some of this stuff is pro forma, contract language, but so there's an indemnity clause. Obviously, the scooter share company holds harmless the county and municipalities that it operates within the county, in any entity with a rebalancing location on its private property. The operator must have a minimum of 150 scooters, which are routinely placed outside of the city of Cleveland. So I think it's one of the concerns of one of the operators is if we've, you got to give us a higher max or no max at all, so that we can, in order for these kind of operators to make a profit, basically, there's got to be enough of these things that exist that people understand where they're at. And if we're forced to put 150 out in the suburbs, then we can't have a max of 500 in total. So that's one of the things we've kind of taken into consideration in early comments. Let's see, this license doesn't give the operator exclusive rights to operate a scooter share or bike share program in the county. Since one of the things that we put into the regulation, I thought we'd get a little comment back on, was that since this is going to be a stationless program, dockless basically, that we would force the operators to put a 20, we want to encourage people to take scooters back to kind of these rebalancing networks. So the idea is that you would give a 25% discount if someone returned a bike or a scooter back to these rebalancing locations. just to try to keep them off the sidewalks or, in harm's way. So, but we haven't heard any comments back on that, so I'm pleased about that. That's good. Insurance, so the scooter share companies, bike share companies must maintain workers' comp, commercial and general liability, business automotive liability insurance throughout the term of their contract. They have insurance requirements. And we as the county will work, and we've been talking to county planning about this, putting together just kind of a rebalancing map so that the operators know where the places should be. Next slide. In terms of safety, all scooters must have a motor of less than 750 watts and have a top motor powered speed of 15 miles per hour. So that's kind of the industry standard or national norm. They must have operating lights turned on during hours of darkness, and every scooter must have a unique identifier clearly displayed so we know which scooter is where. In terms of maintenance, companies have to have the operators must have a staff located within the county capable of performing maintenance and repairs on a regular basis and relocating improperly placed scooters. They've got to provide a 24-hour call center for customers who have questions or concerns. They have to remove unsafe scooters from the road or wherever it's deemed unsafe within 3 hours of receiving a notice during regular business hours, and 12 hours when receiving a notice during weekends, nights, or holidays. And operators have to have we think this is a little bit of job creation, right? And we want to make sure it's a good job. So there's a minimum wage of $15 an hour. And I think the way we write this is that there's a kind of a prevailing wage in the industry, so you can't pay less than the prevailing wage, or you should match the prevailing wage, but no less than $15 an hour. And that you should strive to, if the staff unionizes, then you should strive to work with them. Right? So. And then data sharing requirements, and we had some comments about this, but the current system is kind of funny because they'll give us the bike share, Cycle Hop in UH Bikes just kind of provides us a monthly update on where bikes have gone, how many trips have been taken. They can tell us how many calories have been burned. I think we're over the 3 million calorie burnt on the current system. Maybe it's higher than that now. But that's kind of interesting information for us to have, and so we want to make sure that with scooters and bikes we continue to receive that. So I'll have to provide the county updates on the number of scooters in circulation, riders per day, week, month. And we did have a breakdown by age and gender, and I know that I think Lime has got an issue with that, and I think there's probably some fairness to that, so we may want to take that out. Customer comments and complaints, number of trips that begin in each municipality and end in each municipality. And this is just kind of industry standard, but so all equipment has to have a GPS kind of system located on it or chip located on it. It has to ping every 90 seconds. They'll have to provide us with the raw data that has not been aggregated upon request. I think it's some of the stuff that Jonathan has talked about. Let's see, the operator will not restrict the county's ability to distribute the data in any way. So if we get some good data and we want to share it with folks, we're going to be able to share it. And they'll keep the data for a year minimally. And the customers aren't required to take pictures of things of where they're doing. I mean, they can if they want to, but we're going to require kind of customer, the companies be able to get access to customers' cameras, I think, is one of the issues that has been raised. So overall, I think next slide, benefits of bike and scooter share. It's affordable, as the operators have talked about. It's connectivity, so it's we've been talking about to RTA about kind of logical placements are at RTA bus stops, or rebalancing centers, RTA bus stops, and rapid station centers. Especially with with scooters less, but with bikes, there's a health component to it. People are getting out, getting active, and it's better for the environment. So these are cleaner burning vehicles than automobiles, and I think overall they help with just kind of the general kind of environmental sense of the county, but also I think a lot of cities and areas are taking this up. It's hard to go to cities now anymore where you can't find a bike or scooter share company, scooter share operation, and so we've got a small one, and I think we want to kind of expand what we have. So with that, more than willing to take any questions. And Jonathan, I don't know if you had anything else that I missed in there, but and I want to thank Jonathan. He's been very helpful from the law department.
Well, thank you for that. The only thing I would say, the change I thought we had made, but I just looked through this and saw that it wasn't there. But one of the concerns was if the county has a per trip fee of 15 cents, and the city of Cleveland also has one. Our initial thought was if the city of Cleveland has one that's greater than 15 cents, ours wouldn't apply. Because the money's not going to us anyway. It's going to the city where it starts, so it doesn't make sense for us to double charge. So that'll be a change I think we'll make before the second reading.
Yeah, I think that's the intent.
I had a question.
Maggie was next. Sorry.
Yeah.
Take your turn.
Sorry. No, go for it. So I have two questions. One's a quick one. I think for the per trip fee, if the fare is discounted because they're dropped off at a preferred location, is that per trip the 15 cents discounted as well, or is that
No.
flat?
Fine.
Okay. And then the second question is on the data sharing. Can you just clarify the data that's going to be shared with the county, or that we propose to share with the county? Is it restricted to gender and age, or is there a possibility that, I mean, I don't use scooters, so I'm sorry, but am I required to give my name when I sign up for this? And will
No.
the county in any way know who I was and where I was?
Yeah,
when
so
they
that's
share
I think
data?
what the companies are kind of concerned about is
As am I.
yeah, that we don't want to know individual usage,
Right.
and that they don't provide gender or age. I mean, they don't collect that data, so
Okay.
they would not be giving that to us. That's one of the things they want to take out. So we're trying to get just kind of broad sense of where people are taking scooters, how many are doing it, how effective the network.
Well, I think
can
it's
be.
important to get as much data as we can. I just want to be clear that it's all going to be aggregate.
Yeah.
No personal identifying information.
Right.
That can be connected with location.
Right.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So I had a question. There's all these requirements that need to be met, but what happens if during the term of the license agreement, the operator does not meet any of the regulations? There's not really any provisions for if they aren't following, if they aren't doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. So, I mean, I know that we can terminate this license for, at any time, but that's only effective 30 days after notice. What if we have an operator in there that isn't following the rules or isn't doing something? There's not really a provision for what we do then. What would
Yeah.
you propose for that?
I think so. Right now, I think it's. I have to go back. So we can give them 30 notice. They have 30 days to correct. If they don't correct, then we can pull their license and they can't operate in the county. But you're saying there should be something above and beyond that, right?
Perhaps, and maybe just with some of the requirements, there's just some, I don't know, something to consider, because there's, they must at all times comply with everything in Exhibit A, but what happens if they don't comply with something in Exhibit A? And then also something, I think you had sent a link, and so I was looking at the link, and something came up in one city where bikes were brought in, and then for whatever reason, the operator left all the bikes. I didn't know if there should be a provision in there, because there's also two things that say, after the term of the license agreement, the operator needs to remove the fleet, but what happens if they don't remove the fleet? And so I didn't know if it would make sense to write something into the rules regarding that.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah. I don't know what to write yet, but that makes sense.
I can comment on that a little bit. Just understanding the technology a little bit, I understand that these companies can remotely shut down these vehicles. So maybe a proposed change that we can work with after this meeting and put in before the second reading is that for egregious issues with the company as determined by the Director of Sustainability, the director can request that, or require that all vehicles be shut down immediately until the issue is fixed, be shut down immediately, and then the vehicles have to be removed after 30 days, and if they're not, the county or the city where they're left at can impound the vehicle, something along those lines. Because I think that's a good point. We might want to take harder steps if there is an egregious breach of the terms.
Okay.
I had a question on the operators of bikes and scooters nationally. Is it mainly, we've heard from Bird and Lime, but are those the main two, or are there other companies?
Yeah, there's others. So Lyft has an operator. Motivate, they run the Motivate system. Ford has, I forget the name of the system they operate. CycleHop still does bikes. There's a couple of companies that still do bikes. So I don't know. This is kind of, as the industry has kind of changed over the last 5 years pretty dramatically. I think, there have been some companies like OFO has got out of the business basically, I think, and so a couple have lost, kind of lost their ability to operate. But.
And then is it that an operator shall have at least 150 bikes or scooters and pay the staff $15 minimum wage? Okay, so if a company were to determine that it could make a profit with 80 scooters and like a fair price of labor would be like $10 an hour, then they couldn't. Okay, like
they couldn't get enough.
That
license.
seems like it's a kind of inhibiting towards like maybe startup companies and more favoring the already established companies that would already have the bikes on hand and maybe more experienced staff who could command $15 an hour. And I just want to point that out.
Just so you know, the current UH Bikes has 250 bikes. They've got 2 staff that do rebalancing and maintenance, and I know they're paying them roughly. Staff is unionized now, or organized a union. I think they're paying minimum $15 an hour. So it's one of the things. Actually, they've come in and testified when we were in councils that this is an opportunity to grow, kind of a local workforce that is a living wage workforce. So they are. I don't know. We think it's important that the businesses are going to come here and they're going to make money. I think this isn't stuff that's they're not making money on in other cities, and that if they're doing that, then and they've got a workforce locally, then at least a living wage should be paid.
Maybe a way to address Victor's concern is not necessarily looking at the wage, but the number of bikes. If it is looking at I don't know where the number came from, the minimum number.
Well, the minimum came from we wanted to make sure there were some bikes out in the suburbs, so that just weren't all congregated in the city. And we had a couple good meetings with Lakewood, especially. They've kind of developed a potentially really good network, and the thinking is that you need a mass basically for these things to run and get up and start becoming popular. And for a city like Lakewood, they think they need 75 to 100, bikes, scooters, e-bikes, electric bikes, in order to really make it work and have it become kind of part of the fabric of the community. So Cleveland Heights has talked to us, Shaker, University Heights, and there's that sector over there. And so we thought that, 75, 150, that was kind of what we were thinking.
Just to their point, I think maybe it would be wise to consider relaxing or eliminating the minimum number. I mean, what if a company, a startup in Cleveland Heights who only wants to operate in Cleveland Heights, and Cleveland Heights is smaller, so they only need the 75 or whatever. I don't know why the county cares what the minimum number is. I think we should absolutely stick to the $15 prevailing wage. That's something the county should prioritize, but I agree with Victor and Alexa. I don't know why we would be putting additional restrictions on.
Yeah, just kind of reaction to that was because I do think we want this to be more than just a city program. And you're right, if someone wants to come into Cleveland Heights, then they want to start up. But I don't know that anyone's going to do that. Starting up with 75 bikes in Cleveland Heights, I think we got to kind of push that or nudge that a little bit. And so as the operators come in, they're national operators, we want to encourage them to be out in the suburbs as much as possible, and I think that's what we
Right.
practice.
I think that's encouraging, though, national operators. And realistically speaking, I don't know that anyone's going to ride a scooter from Cleveland Heights to downtown. They're going to ride a scooter from
University.
Coventry to Taylor, within the city.
Or
So
University Circle.
I don't
to
know.
Cleveland
I
Heights,
mean,
yeah.
that's up for you two to debate. I just don't know. Nobody's going to scooter ride across municipalities, probably. So I don't know. What if some local Cleveland Heights guy wants to start up? That's all he wants to do is just work in Cleveland Heights. I don't know why we would inhibit that, because it could be a couple of jobs at a prevailing wage.
Okay.
What if instead of doing a minimum number of bikes that need to be in a suburb, you need to meet a minimum percentage of your bikes that are in the suburb, and the minimum could even be a lower percentage, but for the guy that does want to just operate in Cleveland Heights, well, he's met it, even if he just operates in Cleveland Heights. Just some food for thought, because if you did implement a percentage system, then the big guys that are coming in and have a huge fleet of bikes, that might be more the 150, or I don't even know how many bikes would be or scooters would be in their fleet, but that would go to your issue, but also what Victor had raised. Just a thought.
I just have one.
Put that in the mill to grind, or grist, I guess.
Just one other quick question. Is the $5,000 license fee, if the county then ever wants to change that, would we have to come back to the Administrative Rules Board to do so?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what we want.
Yeah, the thought was we didn't want to have, this is a new program. We anticipate making changes to this as it goes on. It just seemed like it'd be an administrative burden to go back to council to make small tweaks to the technical aspects. So yeah, the thought was we can come and make those changes at the Administrative
Okay.
Rules Board.
I think my question was, did we not want to just give ourselves the discretion to do that to put in that the county can make a determination of what the appropriate fee is?
Oh, to put it in here that the fee can be adjusted administratively without having to make a change to the rules. That's a good idea.
I don't know if that's an option. And then I just want to say, Mike, you did a lot of work on this, and thank you, Jonathan. I mean, the best thing the county can do is establish priorities and then implement actual activities that meet those priorities, and you're doing that. So I just want to acknowledge on record, thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks. I do want to add that, so we are trying to coordinate with the city of Cleveland as much as possible. I'm hoping we'll have kind of an application process that the operators will go through that'll be similar, actually maybe it's the same application process, and it dovetails as much as possible with what they're doing. We really do want to, I know there's concerns among the operators that they've got two sets of, rules, county and the city, but we really are trying to make them as seamless as possible. So.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
So just, Jonathan, next steps here are, we have to have a second reading.
Correct.
And the director has the opportunity to make some changes before that second reading. Is there timing on that and when all that has to happen, or is it?
There's no minimum timeline, so Mike could take as much time as he needs to go back, make his changes, and once he's made them, he'd submit them to Stacy. Stacy would put them online for at least, I think, 2 days. It gets on an agenda, and that agenda has to be out at least 2 days before the meeting.
Okay.
So it's a relatively quick process once Mike gets a new draft, but he has as much time as he needs to get that draft together.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no other business, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion?
Well, I'm assuming there's no other business, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Motion to adjourn?
Is there a second? Anybody, come on.
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.